All right. Okay, so there's going to be three parts to tonight. First of all, for anyone who logged on late, I'm Sheindel Goldfeiz. I'm a first-year pediatric neurology resident at Rutgers. Like I told everyone at the beginning, that means that when I was going through my interview process, I interviewed for peds, adult neurology, and pediatric neurology. So I have a pretty good idea of what that process is like in terms of applying to primary specialties and also subspecialties. I did get, thank God, my first choice residency at a Shabbat accommodating program. And I think a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is from advice I've formulated over the years, both mostly from being part of JOWMA and really seeing what residency directors who are part of JOWMA like and what they expect and what looks good. And seeing questions being thrown into the chats over the years and just really getting a good grasp of what this process is really about. So I hope I can get part of that to you guys tonight. If after tonight, you guys still have questions, you can always reach out to me by WhatsApp. I would recommend or request rather, ask questions on the chat because I think that the best way for everyone to do well is to learn from each other. So please ask whatever comes up over the next few weeks as you get into your interview processes, so that we can help you guys out. Okay, so what we're going to do is three parts. The first thing is I'm going to give a short, rather like medium length after I started like typing it out, introduction to residency interviews, what to expect on the interview trail, and then give some tips about the residency interview. Then we'll do a round of the most common questions. I'll pick 2 to 3 people to share their responses, and then we could all collaboratively give feedback to each other. And so we can try to come up with like the best way to answer each of these most common questions. And then we'll round out the night with a question and answer so that anyone who has questions still remaining at that time can ask at that point. I'll also try to touch on some of the frequently asked questions that I've gotten in the past about residency interviews that I continue to get daily from fourth year students, to try to nip those questions in the bud. All right, so let's get started. So first of all, residency interviews are a lot more relaxed than medical school interviews. At this point, it's really a job interview. And I think it really helps to have the perspective that these programs really only have two goals. Their two goals are get to know you as a person, and then also to see if they want to spend the next X amount of years working with you and training you. And I think it's really good to remember that unlike medical school interviews, once they've extended that invitation to you, you're on an equal playing field with all the other candidates. So that means that if you have this red flag that's really bothering you, you're at a school where you're like, oh, I went to a DO school. I'm like, oh my gosh, are they going to judge me because I went to a DO school, or are they going to compare me? They're not doing that. There's no need to be on the defensive about where you went to school, what your grades are, how you did on your step exam, because if they've invited you, they already know, and they're saying we're considering you equally to everybody else. So be aware of that when you're framing your answers to the questions they ask you, because you don't want to be on the defensive. You want to be showing them like you were right to choose me from that pile of applications because I am someone who will really contribute to your program and it's awesome to be around. And from what I could see in this group, you guys are all awesome to be around. So there's no reason they should leave not feeling that way. Okay, so to give a little breakdown of what most of the interview processes look like. So there's usually two parts. There's the resident mixer, and then there's the actual interview itself. So generally speaking, if with the resident mixer, if you're really interested in a program, you really should make sure to go. And I know everyone has lives, and it's also like fourth year, and you're kind of burnt out, and you're just not really in the mood to do anything extra, especially socially extra. But these things are on Zoom. You literally can show up in your pajamas. You don't have to look normal. Like, you just have to show up. And especially if you're interested in a program, it's really important to go and to show your face on the camera. And I would just say, like, at the end of the interview season, you're really going to feel like you just don't want to, but try your absolute best to be there. If there's a reason you can't be, because sometimes they schedule these at like weird times, or you'll have an interview that's like, you'll have an interview ending that day when the mixer is starting and you're really exhausted, just email the coordinator and tell them, like, I really would love to be there. Sometimes they'll give you an alternate time to go to a different mixer, but like, it's good to just show them that you really want to be there if you can't be. So that's the resident mixers, and they're really low key. Most of them are like most of them aren't really that interactive. They'll like just have the residents going around telling you about the program. But some of them will have you do cute stuff. I had my interview at Virginia Commonwealth where they had us like do a scavenger hunt. So they're like, okay, here's like 5 things we want you to go collect around your house. And actually, they were like one cute thing or like one cuddly thing or something. And I think they were expecting people to bring their puppies. And I brought my baby. So it was a good opportunity to like show them who I was. But some of them are fun, some of them are boring. Just go. The second part is the formal interview. So usually the formal interview will start with an introduction to the program by the residency program director. Um, it's a good time to find your bearings and like you'll see the morning of your interview, especially like 30 minutes before. You're going to be really nervous, and that's totally normal. You've all gone through medical school interviews. Like, you know what that's like, where you're like, your heart's palpitating, your stomach's hurting you, all of a sudden you're dizzy. Um, so this is like a good time to center yourself and get into the mode, but it's also a really important time to be paying attention and taking notes. And the reason for this is that the program director is going to start dropping either hints or direct lines about what they want from their applicants and what their program is. And these are literally feeding you answers to the questions that they're going to ask later of why do you want to come to this program? What can you add to our program? Because they're going to tell you, we really value people who do community service. Oh, well, I volunteer for JOWMA. So I know I need to mention that because that's what they want. So when they ask me, what can you add to our program? Well, I have this many years of community service on my belt, and I know that's really important here. But also when they ask you, why do you want to come? And they tell you, we have an EMT volunteer service that you can do an elective on. You could say, oh, that EMT service, that looks fantastic. That's why I was in, even if you just learned about it, they don't care. Just say, just say like this is why. And it's true, maybe you didn't know about it before, but the fact is that's an interesting factor that makes you want to go to their program. And you can get all of that just from the introductory session at the interview. So it's an opportunity to really highlight your traits and tell them literally, I am what you are looking for. So make sure you pay a little bit of attention. Generally speaking, they're going to send you a calendar like the night before, 2 days before, whatever it is, of who you're going to be speaking to when. So it'll be broken down by the hour or half an hour, whatever it is. They use a program sometimes called Thalamus. I don't know if any of you have been on Thalamus yet. It's pretty intuitive. Don't let it scare you. But the only difference is when you're on Zoom, they'll switch you from room to room in your breakout sessions. With Thalamus, you have to log off of one session and then go on to the next link to go on to your next session. So just make sure you're like, go on to Thalamus the night before and just like get comfortable with the platform, find where the schedule is. It's pretty easy to find, but you don't want to have to like be like, oh my God, where's the schedule the day of your interview? You want to already have found it before. So just go on and make sure it's there. And if it's not, email the coordinator right away so that they know there's a problem. The coordinators are very responsive the days of the interview. So definitely be in touch with them if any problems happen. And then at the end of the interview, you go through all of the people who you have to talk to. So they'll usually have a joint Q&A. By that point, you've spoken to, I mean, for me, it's probably a lot more than most like the general people. Like I spoke to an average like 5 to 6 people at each interview. If you're going into like a primary specialty, you'll speak probably to like 3 people. But even 3 people, you've already asked all your questions. So don't worry if at that point you don't have any more questions for the joint Q&A. Most people won't, and they all know, the program directors know you're tired. So don't get stressed out and be like, oh my God, I have to ask a question at this point. It's fine if you can't. Any questions on that rant before I keep going? No. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about appearance. I know Victoria's wearing scrubs. Totally okay for this. And for the resident mix, they're okay. The rest of you who are on camera, you look perfect. My advice is like wear something super comfortable underneath with a sweater or a blazer. It's just so easy and you'll be comfortable. Wear comfortable pants or skirt under, whatever it is. Keep your pajamas on the whole day. Nobody has to know. That's the benefit of Zoom. But I wore a blouse one time and I am not comfortable in blouses, and the whole day I was like pulling at it. I literally just wore a Henley under my blazer. The good thing about Orthodox Jewish women is like most of our clothing is already going to be more put together and modest in what they're looking for. So you have the benefit. Just try to be comfortable. Put your hair in a style that it's not going to be in your face, that you're not going to be brushing it everywhere. You don't have to look absolutely princess perfect. You have to look polished, but you also don't want to be fidgeting and uncomfortable the whole day. So really prioritize that. I did see a question in the chat box. Where did it go? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is what I was just answering before a little bit. Do you recommend always asking a question in the joint question answers, at least the first one? Or does that sound too pushy? So to answer that, for the first one and the last one, like if you have a real question, you can ask it. But it's not really expected to. If you don't, you'll be fine. It's not a must. If you have a real question, ask it. If it's like a question where it's gonna look like you just wanted to ask a question for the sake of asking a question, then don't. The places I would save your questions for are for those individual interviews. Is a blazer a must? It's not. But something professional that you're really going to be seen from here up. Like obviously what I'm wearing doesn't look professional from here up. It's like bright and whatever. But let's say Ariella, not to call you out, I'm not sure if you're wearing a blazer or a sweater, but you could see that there's like a nice lines and it looks put together and it's not necessarily a collared shirt. But if you have like a black cardigan with a white shirt or whatever it is, the contrast is really nice. Obviously what Kelly's wearing also, and Alexandra and Danya, you guys look perfect. But you want to have like something structured and tailored on. If that's a sweater or blazer, doesn't really matter. Even like a turtleneck with something on top, totally fine. Okay, I'm gonna do one more question and then I'm gonna keep going. I was told to have separate questions based on if a program director or resident is interviewing. Did you find that relevant when you were interviewing? Okay, so not really. I think that with the residents, I asked questions that were more like, how do you feel? Do you feel supported in the program? And that was more just because of personal interest. I would say like the residents obviously don't ask anything that makes you look very negative. Like don't shine a negative light. Like what are some, don't ask like what are the toxic parts of the program? Like don't ask it like that, but say, is it a supportive environment? What resources do you have if you're curious about those things? And obviously when you're asking that to a program director, it's going to be a little bit different. You might ask a program director, how do you look after resident wellness or whatever? But like, are you going to ask the program director that? I don't know. It depends on what your priorities are. I would say with the program director, you more want to ask like what you want to. We'll get into it, but more of what's important is asking them what makes them proud about the program and getting them to brag about it a little bit. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on a little bit. So just some general pointers. So we spoke about dress. First of all, as you guys can tell, I do have a light here. I do want to encourage, I do want to encourage, I think most people here's light is good. Ariella and Victoria, I don't know if you're in like an optimal place, but just to call you out, I'm sorry. Ring lights are really a must. You don't know what the weather is going to be, so you can't really rely on a window if that's what you're using for light. I think that ring lights really just like it just shows your face. And you don't have to worry no matter what the weather is, no matter where you end up sitting. Like I've had days where I've had to lock myself in the most crazy places for my interviews. You don't know when these interviews are going to come in. You could be on vacation with all your kids or all your cousins or all your family. You have no idea what's going to happen. You need to have a good light. And they are super cheap on Amazon. Get whatever it is, borrow from a friend. I heard some people in Teaneck, New Jersey, if anyone wants to come borrow mine for interview season, you're welcome to it. It's a great thing to use and it will just make you stand out because you'll be very clear to see and it's very professional looking. So that's the ring light. The other thing is, I don't mean this colloquially. I really mean this seriously. The most important part of your interview day is to be yourself. And everyone here, I know just from looking at your faces, you're all awesome. You're your own independent people. You're all super successful. You're Orthodox women who are fourth year medical students who are interviewing for residency. You're awesome. There's no question. Show them how awesome you are. Don't be a shell inside of yourself. Don't feel like you can't express who you are. Be proud of where you are and where you come from, and what you bring to the table. And that will shine through and get you to the program that you will benefit the most from. So like have that perspective in mind. And with me saying that, you might be like, oh, that's kind of scary. Like, well, if they judge me, blah, blah, blah. The people you're talking to, and this will help you get through so much of life, they are just people. They're regular people. And if anything, I think being part of JOWMA, sorry to keep tooting JOWMA's horn. I just love JOWMA. Being part of JOWMA really helps you with that because we get to talk to attendings day in and day out. And you see, like, they're people, they're regular people. Be very respectful. Remember that they are to be respected. They're in a higher place. They're in somewhere that we have to respect. But if you can communicate with them as a person and connect with them as a person, you will get so far. And I have so many stories from people where they just spoke about one thing in their interview, and the interviewer was like, oh my God, you played trumpet or something. And like, that's all they spoke about the rest of the time. And I have so many of my own interviews where I would bring up one aspect of one of my kids or something. And like, that's all we would talk about the rest of the time. So just, remember that when you're having these conversations, you want to click with them as a person. That's how they remember you. The next thing is to have 3 to 5 clinical stories that you prepare that can be adapted to multiple situations. So you're going to get questions like, describe a challenging time, describe a time you worked as a team, describe a time you worked as a leader. It's not necessarily productive to really prepare for each of these questions individually because there's so many that they can ask, and they can ask it. Most of the times I've gotten questions in interviews, it's not these like single questions that you really see on Google. It's more like adaptations of those questions. So the best thing to do is prepare 3 to 5 things that are clinically relevant that you can change to adapt to whatever question it is they ask you, and where you can really demonstrate different character traits about you. The one thing that you definitely should make sure you always have, and this is going to be one of the questions, is a challenge that you overcame. Almost all my interviews ask me about a challenge I overcame. And then obviously, prepare for the most common questions in interviews. So what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses, challenges? A time that you got constructive criticism. Like literally Google what are the most common, the top 10 questions for interviews for residency. Prepare those ones because, those ones, if you don't prepare, everybody else did, you'll look bad. And then one more thing before we go into the questions. The one more thing is red flag. So this is like a frequently asked question I get. So a lot of people are very concerned. They're like, I have this big red flag. I failed step 1. I failed my shelf exam. I was the bottom of my class. Like, what do I do? How do I explain this? So like I said in the beginning, don't be on the defensive. You're in an interview. They know that you failed that class. They know you failed that shelf. They know that you were at the bottom of the class, but they saw something and they wanted to interview you. Your goal isn't to defend yourself. Your goal is to prove them right, that they were right to interview you. So what is better is, and we'll go through this while we go through the questions, is it's really how you present the story of what happened and how you grew and learned from it that will change everything. And you need to own that narrative, meaning that if you think they're going to ask you about your step 1, or you really, really think this is something that you have to bring up, make sure that you have a way that you want to talk about it that is an explanation, not an excuse, and say it to them before they ask you about it. Don't wait for them to be like, what happened to step, which they probably won't. Instead, when they ask you what was a challenge you overcame, maybe use it to answer that question. Okay. Before we go into like the round robin question answers, let me just take some other questions. Okay, so Kira, thank you. Kira just put ring light in there. What are red flag things to say or mention or topics to avoid? So I think with the red flags, it's really a matter of what you feel you need to say. I think a lot of students really think that residencies care a lot more about specific things than they actually do. Like if you like percentiles, let's say, depending on what you're applying for, and everyone here, no one here is applying for like a surgical subspecialty. I mean, OBGYN, but no one's applying for like plastics or derm or ophthalmology, ENT. Those ones, like, yeah, they're nitpicky because they can be, but the other ones, they want a well-rounded applicant. So your red flag is probably not as red flaggy as you think it is. Um, I think it should, you should talk to a mentor about your specific situation. But don't necessarily think that that one thing that you're going crazy over is really what is keeping them up at night, because it probably isn't.
Um,
Um, yes, sorry,
just
go
as
ahead.
like as a question from that question. Thank you, by the way, for answering. Um, and this is something that I've just been asking people in general, just because me and some other people, like, we just have not been in America that so much. Do you have any advice in terms of like Israel and mentioning Israel, like especially for those of us who go to school in Israel and it's such a big part of like, any of the volunteering we did or anything like that. And I think a lot of us are nervous going into interviews and like how that might
Yeah.
look this year.
So first of all, the thing that they see across your application is Sackler, like Tel Aviv University. Like, you're not hiding from them the fact that you went to a medical school in Israel, not a secret. Which means if they're interviewing, you don't really have to worry about that. Also, just remember, I always think these things are a lot of mindset. It's within your rights not to answer those questions. If someone asks you those questions, it's not appropriate. And it's also probably not a program you want to go to. So I think that that should be more of a red flag for you if a program is asking you what your position is on the Middle East, or like anything about the Israel conflict. It's really not appropriate. Okay, no problem. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.